Welcome, everyone, to our journey into animal diversity. Today, we're going to explore the fascinating social life of insects. Imagine a bustling human city where everyone has a specific job from birth, working in perfect harmony to keep the city alive. This is exactly how social insects like ants, bees, and termites live. By the end of this lesson, you will understand not just how these incredible societies function, but the hidden mathematical rules that drive their ultimate sacrifices. To begin understanding these creatures, we must first change how we view an individual insect. Why does this matter? Because looking at a single ant is like looking at a single cell in your body. It does not tell the whole story. Social insects do not live as isolated individuals wandering the world alone. Instead, they build massive, highly organized societies called colonies. In these colonies, millions of individuals work together so seamlessly that biologists often describe the entire colony as a single giant living organism, or a superorganism. By cooperating in this extraordinary way, they can build towering structures, defend against giant predators, and gather food much more efficiently than any single insect ever could. Now that we see the colony as a superorganism, let us define what makes it truly social. In biology, the highest level of social organization is called eusociality, which literally translates to true sociality. For an insect species to be considered truly eusocial, it must meet three strict biological criteria. First, there must be a clear division of labor involving a reproductive caste, like a queen, and a non-reproductive caste, like sterile workers. Second, there must be cooperative brood care, meaning individuals work together to feed and protect the young of other individuals rather than just their own. Third, there must be overlapping generations within a single colony, meaning adult offspring stay at the nest to help their parents raise their younger siblings. Before we move on to their ecological impact, let us see this division of labor with a concrete visual example. Here we are looking at the classic honeybee caste system. Notice the three distinct types of bees. On the left is the queen, the reproductive female, whose sole job is egg-laying, as shown by the arrow pointing to the honeycomb cell. On the right is the drone, the reproductive male, whose purpose is mating with the queen. In the center is the much smaller worker bee, a sterile female. The arrows show her taking on all the colony's maintenance tasks, like foraging at the flower and defending the hive. This diagram perfectly illustrates the first strict rule of eusociality we just discussed. Having seen how their societies are structured, we must ask, why does the social life of insects matter to us and the health of our planet? Social insects are the invisible engineers of our global ecosystems. They play critical roles that keep the natural world functioning smoothly. Bees, for instance, are responsible for pollinating a massive portion of the fruits, nuts, and vegetables that humans and other animals consume daily. Meanwhile, ants and termites constantly turn over the soil, aerating it and breaking down dead plant matter, which recycles essential nutrients back into the earth. If these highly organized societies were to suddenly disappear, human agriculture would collapse, forests would suffocate under dead vegetation, and countless species would face immediate extinction. Understanding their immense ecological value brings us to a fascinating evolutionary puzzle. Why would a worker bee give up her own chance to have babies, or even sacrifice her life just to help the queen? It might seem completely counterintuitive for an animal to give up its own reproductive ability. However, this is explained by an evolutionary strategy called kin selection. Kin selection favors the reproductive success of an organism's relatives. From the perspective of the genes, helping relatives is actually a selfish act. Because relatives share a large percentage of the same DNA, ensuring that your siblings survive and reproduce is another way of ensuring your own shared genes are successfully passed on to the next generation. This concept of kin selection leads us directly to the mathematical framework that governs it, known as Hamilton's rule. Conceptually, this formula was developed to calculate exactly when an altruistic act becomes evolutionarily beneficial. The rule states that altruism makes sense if R times B is strictly greater than C. Let us break down these symbols. The variable R represents the genetic relatedness between the helper and the recipient, measured as a fraction between 0 and 1. The variable B represents the reproductive benefit, meaning the number of extra offspring produced thanks to the help. Finally, C represents the reproductive cost, which is the number of personal offspring the helper gives up. Physically, if the relatedness R increases, meaning the insects share more genes, the left side of the equation grows, making them mathematically much more likely to sacrifice themselves for each other. Now that we have our formula, let us apply it to a classic dilemma faced by a worker bee. We're given that a worker bee can either leave the hive to produce 2 of her own offspring or stay and help the queen. We need to find the genetic cost, C, of staying. We choose Hamilton's rule to compare the genetic payoffs. First, we look at what she gives up. She would have had 2 offspring. The genetic relatedness between a mother and her own offspring is 0.5. By multiplying the 2 lost offspring by the relatedness factor of 0.5, we find the total genetic value she is sacrificing. The final answer for the cost is 1.0. This represents the exact genetic penalty the worker pays by choosing not to breed. Having calculated the cost, we must now determine the benefit of staying to see if Hamilton's rule is satisfied. We are given that by staying, the worker's dedicated help allows the queen to produce 5 extra sisters. Because of the unique genetics of bees, sisters share a very high genetic relatedness of 0.75. We multiply this relatedness by the 5 extra sisters to find the total genetic benefit, which equals 3.75. Finally, we compare this benefit to our previous cost of 1.0. Since 3.75 is significantly greater than 1.0, Hamilton's rule is strongly satisfied. Physically, this final answer proves that the worker passes on much more of her own genetic material by raising highly related sisters than she ever could by having her own babies. Let us reinforce this concept by examining a life or death scenario involving a soldier termite. A soldier termite sacrifices its life to save its siblings from an attacking anteater. We need to determine if this suicidal defense mechanism is supported by evolutionary math. First, we calculate the cost, C. By dying, the soldier gives up the chance to have exactly 1 offspring of its own in the future. The genetic relatedness to that potential offspring is 0.5. We multiply the 1 lost offspring by the relatedness factor. The final answer for the cost is 0.5. This number represents the complete loss of the soldier's future genetic legacy through direct reproduction. With the cost established, we now calculate the benefit to see if the sacrifice was mathematically worth it. We are given that the soldier's death successfully saves 4 siblings who would have otherwise been eaten. In termites, siblings share a genetic relatedness of 0.5, just like in humans. We multiply the 4 saved siblings by this relatedness factor of 0.5, giving us a total genetic benefit of 2.0. Comparing our two final values, we see that the benefit of 2.0 is strictly greater than the cost of 0.5. This final answer perfectly explains why suicidal defense evolved. Even though the soldier loses its life, its genes survive and multiply much more effectively through the saved siblings. We have covered a tremendous amount of ground today, so let us summarize our key takeaways. First, we learned that eusocial insects transform from simple bugs into highly complex superorganisms through a strict division of labor and cooperative care. Second, we saw that these tiny societies are the invisible engineers of our world, absolutely vital for pollination and soil health. Finally, we discovered that their incredible altruism is not random. Through Hamilton's rule, we proved that extreme cooperation is a mathematically sound strategy driven by kin selection. You now have a deep understanding of the delicate balance of our ecosystems and the profound power of cooperation in the natural world. Great job today!